Hello guys and welcome to our brand new video. So, today we have something very special planned in store for you guys. And you won't believe what it is. So, I'm sure you all heard about the Titanic. I'm not pointing to the Titanic, but let's say I am. A ship that crashed and was hit by an iceberg. So, what if I told you that there was one person on that ship who saved many lives, and thanks to him, many people lived to tell the story. Today we are going to tell his adventure. This story is brought to you by our special guest star, Burn. Okay, so before we begin the interview, could you just give us a bit of context on why the Titanic sank?
Well, the Titanic sank because it was the most unsafe ship that had ever set sail. It was insanely dangerous. And the reason it's called the unsinkable Titanic is because they knew that and they were trying to advertise it as not being what it was. So it was going to sink if it hit anything at all. So it wasn't a great surprise to the engineers, but the main reason it was so famous was because a lot of very rich people and very powerful people were on the ship and died with it.
Yeah, so that's why. And like, when it hit the iceberg, what happened to it?
It brushed against the side of an iceberg for a multitude of really silly reasons. They didn't have any binoculars in the crow's nest because the person who had the binoculars had left them in the closet and the person with the key had stayed in England. And the radio operator was too busy sending private messages for which he'd been paid rather than actually listen to reports of an iceberg in the area. They were going too fast. And when they tried to turn, the engines weren't powerful enough to actually steer it out the way. So it brushed along the side of an iceberg. The actual damage was only about that deep. The thickest it was about 18 inches, so that big, in a ship that was one of the largest that had ever set sail. But it was long. And so there was a little bit of water coming into a lot of different sections of the ship.
Yeah.
And the bulkheads, which in most ships stop the water coming into each section so at least some of it stays afloat and that can keep the whole ship afloat, they had been knocked out to make room for big sweeping staircases and huge dining areas and a big area to dance, and trying to make it as luxurious as possible had made it extraordinarily unsafe. And the main thing was most ships at the time had two holes, so you could scratch the outer hole and the inner hole would stay intact. To save money, they'd gotten rid of the inner hole. So any scratch, water came in.
Wow, that's a lot of reasons why the Titanic sank. It looks like it was doomed to failure from the start. But now, can you tell us a bit more about this hero?
Absolutely. So yes, Charles Jovan, he was the head baker on the Titanic. He was from the Isle of Man and he was fairly nondescript until that night, and he saved probably 100 to 200 people's lives. And how he did that became a huge field of study afterwards.
Okay, so hold on, I have a really important question.
Yes.
So he was a baker, right?
He was.
Did he bake good croissants? So, all jokes aside, but how did he actually save the people on the Titanic? Well, not all of them, but how did he help them?
Well, the main thing he did was he didn't panic, and he also understood exactly what was happening, unlike almost everybody else on board. So the first thing he did was he went to the lifeboats. He was in charge of two of them. He loaded up both his lifeboats with 60 people, the only two full lifeboats on the entire Titanic. He made sure all his staff, all 15 bakers, were safe. He then gave up his seat to a lady. He was rather rough. People didn't want to get on board. He was forcing them on. At one point he grabbed a baby from a woman's chest, threw the baby on the lifeboat and told the woman to chase him, saying, "You'll thank me later." After he had done all that, so he'd saved 60 people's lives, he then thought, okay, I'm gonna die. So he went down to his cabin, he got out a 2-liter bottle of whiskey and downed it. So anyway, he is now unconscious in his cabin. He wakes up about an hour and a half later. He thinks, oh, I got it wrong. The ship isn't sinking. Then he looks down His cabin door, there's water pouring in underneath it. And he realizes he was absolutely right. He then stumbles upstairs. Bear in mind he's had 2 litres of whiskey. He's a little bit drunk. He gets on the deck and everyone is panicking. They're screaming, they're running around. Exactly like that. and he just doesn't understand why people are doing this, because he's quite calm. Lots of people have jumped into the sea. He then gathers up a big load of deck chairs and throws them in for them to float on.
Hopefully he didn't throw one on top of
He almost definitely did.
Okay.
He probably saved about 100 people's lives. He then thought, okay, I'm going to stay dry. I can see the ship sinking. I'm going to get all the coats I can find. Not all his. He just went around helping himself to all the coats. So he was like this. And he thought, if I can keep my hair dry, I might survive. So he stood at the very, very back of the boat, the bow of the boat, and as the entire ship sank into the ocean, he went down like an elevator, and at the last second, he just steps off. Boom.
But how did he survive?
No one at the time understood how, because he survived for 2.5 hours in 2-degree C. No one thought that was possible. Everyone thought you died after about 2 minutes. Because as you get into cold water, you go, you hyperventilate. And after 90 minutes, you stop, you calm. And as long as you keep moving, your body stays warm. Your blood keeps on pumping. If you don't, and you panic, you're dead in an hour. He just moved around, swimming, basically, keeping his legs moving, keeping his arms moving, in really, really, really cold water, and survived for 2.5 hours. He lost 2 toes, but he lived.
Okay.
And it was so interesting because no one understood how he could do it. So they were thinking maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was this. Turns out it's just because he didn't panic. He was so brave, or stupid, that he just didn't panic. And he knew exactly what he had to do.
So what was his lasting legacy?
Well, he had a few. The first one, the most important, being how to survive in freezing cold water. A lot of studies were done, and it turned out that effectively the way he did it, just staying calm, could allow you to live for 2 hours in freezing cold water. And I had to study him. When I was in the army, I had to study how to cross freezing cold rivers based on everything they'd learned about him. And it changed science. The second thing was people admired him greatly. He was a hero. And one of the greatest headmasters of all time, who was a former headmaster of Eton, was quoted as saying, "My job is to make young men who are acceptable at a dance, but indispensable in a shipwreck," because he admired Charles Jovan so much. And that inspired, possibly, International Baccalaureate, because that's why people in International Baccalaureate, they study a wide range to become more rounded. And so that's a very possible influence of him just being so brave, effectively.
Yeah.
And the last and most important thing is ships became so much safer. You had to, before that, the number of seats on lifeboats was based on the tonnage. Now it's based on how many people are on the ship. You're not allowed to set sail unless there's a seat for every single person. Hulls have to be double hulled. Bulkheads have to be clear of any gaps. Everything was after the Titanic sank, and largely because of his testimony, because he is one of the very few people who stayed totally sensible throughout the entire sinking.
And why did they only do that after the Titanic sank, with seats on the lifeboats?
Because up until then you could make a lot of money by not having that many lifeboats and by using less iron to make your ships. Now, you know, we were talking about making money, and that they were building worse and worse ships to save money. The second that the ship went down, the second Charles Jovan stepped off the last bit of the bow of the ship, every single crew member stopped being paid.
Oh.
They stopped their salary at that very minute because there's no ship. There can't be a crew. And that kind of thing was prevalent at the time. And they cut back on that quite a bit as well, and started to treat sailors a lot better after the incident.
And who were they working for? Like Charles and the rest?
They were working for White Star Line, which interestingly is still alive. It's owned by Cunard Line. So the company's still going.
How? Like, how is it still going?
Because it was deemed an accident at the time. And it was only afterwards when they researched to find out just how dangerous it was that they said, okay, let's make ships safer, but let's not blame anyone.
Okay.
So yeah, no one got punished. Around 1,000 people died, no one got punished.
So, Charles was the hero of the story.
He was.
Who was the villain?
Well, for me, the worst guy on board was the radio operator. He didn't report icebergs in the area, and he didn't even send out SOSs properly. The reason being, lots of rich people were coming through saying, I say, would you send a lovely message to my friends in New York to say that we're going to be there in 2 days?
Yes, but give me money.
Here's lots of money. Exactly.
Thank you.
And so he wasn't doing his job at all. And in fact, there was a ship that was close enough to come and save people, but they were German speaking. And for some reason, he didn't like Germans. So when they responded, he just told them to leave. He didn't want their help.
This video wouldn't be possible without Burn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raphael. Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And the fourth influence Charles Joven had on my life is... Joey. My son, Joven. Run, go!